The wind howled through broken rafters, whistling like a warning across the hollow expanse of the derelict warehouse as the SWAT team moved in formation, boots thudding softly against concrete soaked with the residue of old oil and forgotten crimes. Their flashlights sliced through the darkness in disciplined beams, the air thick with dust and the metallic tang of tension, every man and woman breathing in sync as they fanned out in silence. Until Titan, the canine unit, a towering black German shepherd with grizzled fur and eyes like sharpened coal, abruptly stopped dead in his tracks, mid-stride, muscles taut, nostrils flaring, the silence around him shattering not with sound, but with stillness so sudden and absolute that the nearest officer, Ramirez, halted too, hand instinctively tightening on his rifle as he whispered a sharp, "What is it, boy?" But Titan didn't budge, didn't whine or bark, only stared, unblinking, into the far corner of the cavernous space, where shadows rippled against corrugated metal like breath. And for a long, breathless moment, no one moved, not even the dust motes dancing in the flashlight beams. And then, with heartbeats pounding like war drums in their ears, the team's commander gave the silent signal to proceed, only for Titan to release a low, guttural growl from deep in his chest, so visceral and full of primal warning that the entire team froze again, a creeping dread sliding down their spines like ice water. And as Titan's growl deepened, his body crouched low, ears forward, tail rigid, eyes never leaving the wall that suddenly seemed too ordinary, too deliberate, too quiet, until finally, with one decisive bark that cracked through the stillness like a gunshot, Titan lunged toward the wall, and just as fast, the scene cut to black, plunging everything into suffocating darkness, the only sound a distant heartbeat slowing. Slowing, then silence. Then, in bold, pale type against the black screen, the words emerged one by one, stark and cold as frostbite. 3 hours earlier. The rain fell like shattered glass against the windows of the precinct, streaking the world beyond in blurs of gray and grief. A storm that had crawled in from the edge of the horizon just as 17-year-old Alex stepped quietly into the canine unit's side hall, his sneakers damp, his hoodie clinging to the chill that no heater could ever truly chase away. Not since the day the badge came home folded in a flag. Not since the words, "He didn't make it," turned the world into a cold, slow-motion nightmare. And now, here he was, a boy hollowed by loss, tracing his fingertips along the chain-link kennel gates as if they were cathedral doors, each step echoing memories of his older brother. The hero, the protector, the one who'd taught him how to stand tall even when he trembled. The one who left for duty and never came back, except in headlines and ceremony, and the box of medals too heavy for what they'd replaced. And then came the sound, soft but sure, of padded feet approaching, a low whine that rose like a question in the dark. And there was Titan, the last piece of his brother the world hadn't taken, the war dog with a stare too knowing, too human, eyes like storm clouds remembering lightning. And as Alex knelt, arms slowly wrapping around the beast's neck, Titan leaned into him with the kind of weight that said, "I remember too," the kind of silence that could only exist between two souls bound by someone who was no longer there. He was your person, Alex thought, forehead pressed to Titan's fur. But he was mine first. And as the thunder cracked outside, rattling windows and lighting the walls in bursts of blue, Alex whispered the name aloud. Ethan. And Titan's ears twitched as if he too felt the name like a wound that hadn't scabbed, hadn't healed, only sank deeper with every patrol Titan returned from alone. They stayed like that, boy and dog, while the storm raged like something furious and alive, each flash casting long shadows on the floor that danced like ghosts trying to find their way home. And Alex's chest rose and fell in slow rhythm. Grief coiled tight around his ribs, his thoughts circling like birds over a battlefield. They said time helps, but they don't know what it's like to lose the one person who made you believe the world had a place for you. And Titan, as if hearing every word his heart couldn't say aloud, nuzzled closer, pressing into him like a promise, like an oath carved not in words but in shared silence. And outside, as the rain kept falling, the storm inside Alex refused to quiet. But at least now, in this small, trembling corner of the world, he wasn't weathering it alone. The late afternoon sun filtered through the slatted blinds of the precinct like golden knives, carving the canine unit hallway into fragments of light and shadow that shimmered with the quiet weight of farewell. Each step Alex took echoing with the knowledge that this would be the last time, at least for a long while, that he would walk these halls not as a visitor, but as someone who belonged, as a boy who still believed he could piece together what was broken. His duffel bag hung low on his shoulder, the frayed college patch barely catching the sun, but his gaze wasn't on the future waiting beyond those doors. It was locked on the kennel ahead, on the slow-rising form of Titan, who stirred the moment Alex stepped into view, as if the dog had sensed his heartbeat from yards away, as if grief had its own frequency, and Titan had never stopped listening to it. Alex knelt beside the gate, fingers trembling not from fear but from the sheer ache of parting. And when the latch clicked open and Titan stepped into the light, the two moved as one, as though time hadn't passed, as though this was still their world, not one shattered by death and distance. With hands tender and deliberate, Alex reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out the folded piece of paper, creased but dry, smudged at the corners from being held too tightly. And without a word, he slipped it into the inside flap of Titan's vest, the fabric still warm from patrol, still etched with the faint scent of field dust and old leather. And as his fingers lingered there, the sun caught the moment just right, painting the vest in flickers of gold and black, the light dancing like memory itself, fleeting and fierce, before being swallowed again by shadow. Titan tilted his head, sensing something unspoken, and Alex leaned in close, his voice barely a whisper, breath trembling against fur. "Trust your instincts." A pause. A heavier whisper, cracking at the edges. "Eh." Then nothing. Just silence so complete it felt sacred, broken only by the rustle of the note settling inside the vest, like a secret passed from soul to soul. The moment stretched, pulled long like the last note of a song, until Titan stepped back, eyes still locked on Alex, and the boy rose with effort, the goodbye caught somewhere between his ribs and throat, too big to say out loud, too small to stop the tears pooling at the corners of his eyes. He gave a final nod, a half-smile that didn't quite reach his face, and as he turned, the fading sun caught them both one last time, boy and dog, shadow and light, before the door clicked shut behind him, and the hallway was once again empty, save for Titan standing watch, the note tucked close to his heart, waiting for the moment it would matter most. The wheels of the armored transport hummed low against the wet asphalt, carving through the black of night, as if chasing the storm itself, headlights slicing through mist and fog. While inside, the SWAT team moved in practiced silence, gear checked, eyes steeled, breath steady but tight, as if each of them, without saying a word, could feel something taut in the air, a pressure building behind the calm, like thunder poised on the edge of a scream. Titan sat between Ramirez and the squad leader, his posture upright, eyes locked ahead, the glow of red interior lights painting his dark fur like war paint. The flick of his ears the only sign that he too was alert to the unspoken. Outside, flashes of lightning stitched the horizon in angry veins of white, revealing the distant silhouette of their destination. A crumbling industrial warehouse, far from any main road, its rusted towers and twisted scaffolding clawing at the sky like the bones of something ancient, forgotten, and dangerous. Operation Nightfall, the commander had called it. Simple in theory. Intercept a cartel exchange, neutralize all threats, secure the cargo. But simple had a way of turning to chaos when you least expected it. And as the vehicle pulled to a halt beneath the shuddering moan of wind through steel, even the most seasoned operators glanced at one another with eyes that said, "Something's not right." Titan hopped down with fluid precision, sniffing the air, nostrils flaring as the scent of oil, rust, and rain met his senses. And for a moment he paused, just long enough for Ramirez to notice, before pressing forward, boots and paws crunching over gravel and broken glass as the team spread into formation. They entered through a side breach, the hallway beyond silent but for the rhythmic drip of water from some unseen pipe, each footstep echoing just a second too late. The acoustics warped like the building itself was holding its breath. Up ahead, a fork. 2 squads, splitting, clearing with near mechanical efficiency. But as they moved deeper, past stacks of rotting crates and half-collapsed scaffolding, the normal flow of mission rhythm began to fray. Small things. A door that should have been locked, standing slightly ajar. A security camera pointed away from high traffic zones. Crates stacked in patterns too deliberate for a criminal's laziness. It wasn't just that something felt off. It was that something wanted to feel right, like a set stage waiting for actors to step into place, and with each turn, each shadow, each distant roll of thunder, the tension coiled tighter around their nerves like a wire being drawn slow across skin. Titan's pace slowed slightly, ears pivoting, body angled to the left. But he kept walking, obedient, focused, yet somewhere behind those watchful eyes was the whisper of something remembered, something tucked away inside his vest, waiting to be understood. The storm outside cracked louder now, closer, as if it too were holding back a scream. And the team moved on, one step deeper into the mouth of something that had been waiting for them. The shadows twisted and lengthened as the team crept deeper into the warehouse's skeletal maze, their breath audible in their earpieces, boots brushing against metal debris and broken glass, the silence pressing in tighter with every step, as if the building itself had gone still to listen, to wait. And Titan moved with measured precision at Ramirez's side, his snout lifting occasionally, ears tilting like antennae tracking an invisible signal, until suddenly, with no warning, the dog froze, a guttural rumble crawling from deep in his chest, low and vibrating like the prelude to a storm. Ramirez hissed, "Titan, heel!" But Titan's stance only dropped lower, eyes locked on a patch of wall that looked no different than the others, bare metal, flickering overhead lights, a stack of empty crates leaning carelessly in front. And then, in a flash of motion, Titan broke formation, bounding across the space toward that corner with a ferocity that drew every weapon up, safety clicks echoing as the team pivoted toward the sudden break in protocol. "Hold positions," barked the team lead, but their eyes darted, confused, wary between each other and the dog now pawing madly at the floor, scratching, digging at a patch of dust-caked concrete like a beast possessed. The air seemed to still, the storm outside roaring faintly, through cracks in the steel siding, lightning briefly illuminating Titan's frantic movements, until he stopped, rigid, then erupted into a bark that wasn't warning. It was alarm, furious, desperate, relentless, the kind of bark trained handlers recognized as "something's wrong, get out now." And yet the team, stunned by the suddenness, hesitated, seconds lost in decision, glances traded, eyes wide, breath hitching, until Ramirez lunged forward with a shout. He found something, but it was already too late. The wall behind the crates shifted, no, clicked, as if unlocking, and for one frozen heartbeat, everything held its breath. Titan mid-bark, the team's weapons raised, rain pounding in staccato on the tin roof, the hum of a hidden mechanism whirring behind the wall, and then the world snapped in half. Gunfire exploded from behind a false panel, muzzle flashes strobing like lightning within the shadows, the warehouse erupting in chaos as bullets tore through silence, through crates, through cover, the squad diving, shouting, returning fire in a flurry of red tracers and shouted orders, while Titan darted to cover with primal speed, the note inside his vest pressing close to his chest like a secret that had just come alive. Above the cacophony, a final slow-motion beat. Titan's bark echoing again, furious and certain, then fade to black, the sound of gunfire still ringing, echoing into the void. Darkness swelled like a held breath, the world suspended in the echo of chaos, gunfire still crackling faintly as the screen hung black. Then, in stark white lettering, cold and surgical, the countdown appeared. 02. Until detonation, the colon blinking with the pulse of fate. And when the scene snapped back into motion, it was in fragmented chaos. Sirens inside earpieces, rapid radio chatter, the sharp thud of boots scrambling for cover, and Titan's bark piercing through it all like a war cry made of instinct and defiance. As Ramirez rolled behind a broken pallet, a flash caught his eye. A glint of copper wire, barely visible beneath the cracked concrete where Titan had clawed seconds earlier. And for a split second, time froze again, the pieces crashing into place. Pressure trigger, false wall, deadly misdirection. It hadn't just been an ambush with bullets. It had been layered, strategic. A trap designed to kill not by gunfire alone but by fire, by shrapnel, by a detonation wired to movement, to trust, to routine. And the bitter twist, the knife of irony that slid cold into the spine of every operator in that room, was that they had almost ignored him, almost walked into it, blind to the snarl of warning in Titan's voice, because it wasn't protocol, because a dog's instincts aren't printed on the mission briefing, because the last time he disobeyed, it was dismissed as grief, trauma, a relic of a dead partner. And yet now, as the realization crashed through them all, it was those same instincts that had saved them. The commander's voice barked orders, directing a fallback, but his tone trembled, disbelief dancing beneath the command, because the wall, the one Titan had fixated on, was now humming with barely contained energy, the blinking red of a concealed detonator growing faster, faster, a heartbeat out of control, and for a moment no one breathed, no one blinked, no one dared move. Titan stood at the edge of the trigger zone, unmoving, growling like a sentinel carved from the storm itself, his body tense, tail stiff, as if holding the world together with sheer will, buying seconds, precious seconds, for the team to pull back. And they did, every step a gamble, every backward glance toward the wall etched with disbelief. Ramirez, eyes wide, clutched Titan's vest as they ducked behind a reinforced column, and just as the last boot cleared the zone, click! A sickening mechanical pop echoed through the air, and for a breathless instant, there was nothing. No flash, no boom, only the countdown blinking once more. 001, and then fade to black, silence, total and absolute, broken only by a heartbeat, distant, rising, as if the story itself were refusing to die with the detonation. Smoke hung in the air like a ghost that refused to leave, curling through the broken warehouse windows and mingling with the harsh beam of emergency floodlights, now flickering on one by one, bathing the scene in staccato white as medics moved swiftly, patching wounds, calming nerves, assessing the wreckage that had nearly become a mass grave. Debris littered the floor in blackened heaps, the scorched outline of the false wall now nothing more than twisted steel and scorched concrete, and amid it all stood Titan, silent, still, eyes scanning the room not for threats but for confirmation that every single life had made it out, that his warning had worked, that whatever buried instinct had gripped him at that critical second had done what it was meant to do. Ramirez crouched behind an overturned crate, hands trembling as the adrenaline finally crashed and gave way to something deeper, something heavy and unspoken. And as he rested his hand on Titan's neck, his fingers brushed something tucked along the inner lining of the dog's vest. Confused, he reached inside, and there it was. A folded piece of paper, fragile and creased from weeks of unnoticed wear, the ink slightly smudged from heat and time. He unfolded it slowly, like handling a relic, his breath catching as he read the words aloud, soft and unsure at first, but gaining gravity with each syllable. Trust your instincts. A. A hush fell over the team, louder than any explosion, louder than the chaos that had just consumed the room, as eyes turned toward the note and then to Titan, still standing like a sentinel at the edge of the blast radius, his frame outlined in smoke and dust and a kind of battered nobility that no training could teach. Only love, loss, loyalty. The commander took a slow step forward, helmet under his arm, eyes on the dog like he was seeing him for the first time. Not just as a unit, a tool, a protocol, but as something more. And in the stillness, a voice in Ramirez's head whispered, "Maybe the boy knew more than we thought. Maybe instinct isn't something you train. Maybe it's something you trust." The note fluttered slightly in his hand, the storm outside still murmuring through broken rafters like a lullaby for the dead. But inside, there was only this moment. Titan unmoving, guarding not just the blast site, but the memory of a boy who had whispered hope into his fur and believed he would carry it forward. A slow zoom closed in on the note, the edges frayed, the ink pressed deep into the fibers like a truth branded into paper, and behind it, Titan's eyes gleamed, not with pride, but with the solemn weight of purpose fulfilled. The flames flickered quietly in the small fireplace at the edge of Alex's living room, their glow casting long, trembling shadows across the floor like echoes of battles fought far from home, like whispers of lives nearly lost and bonds that had refused to break, even across time, even across death. The television glowed beside it, sound low but sharp, anchoring the room in the present as the newscaster's voice described the events unfolding at the warehouse outside the city. Words like ambush, heroic intervention, and canine saves elite team drifting through the air like drifting ash. But Alex didn't hear the details. His eyes were locked on the screen, frozen on the image of Titan standing tall amidst rubble and smoke, his vest torn, his fur dusted in soot, his body still and calm like a monument to something primal and pure. And in that instant, something cracked open in Alex's chest, something old and wounded that suddenly felt transformed. He pressed a hand to his mouth, breath catching as the camera cut to Ramirez kneeling beside the dog, tears shining faintly in the officer's eyes as he gently held up the now famous note, the one Alex had written in silence, in grief, in hope that instinct would outlive goodbye. And as the camera slowly zoomed in on those 4 words, "Trust your instincts." A. Alex felt the tears fall freely, not out of sadness, but something softer, heavier. Relief, perhaps. Or maybe the weight of knowing his brother's spirit, the bond they had both shared with Titan, hadn't vanished into the silence of a folded flag, but had moved forward, alive in the growl that had stopped a team from dying, in the bark that defied orders, in the loyalty that held a line between life and death. Across the city, at the warehouse's blackened edge, the SWAT team gathered now not with routine detachment, but reverent caution. Their steps slower, more deliberate, their glances toward Titan filled not with command but respect. And for the first time in a long time, Titan didn't feel like a tool, an asset, or an extension of protocol, but something sacred, a guardian who had stepped between fire and fate, who had remembered what others forgot. That sometimes instinct is the only thing that sees clearly when everything else is blind. The fire in the hearth cracked gently, its warmth reaching for Alex's face as he leaned forward, hand still over his lips, eyes never leaving the screen, a bittersweet smile breaking through the tears, because he knew in his bones, in his soul, that even though he had left the precinct, even though the leash had been unhooked, the bond had never broken. Titan was still fighting, still listening, still holding Ethan's memory like a torch in the dark. And now, the whole world knew it too. The auditorium was quiet, the kind of quiet reserved for cathedrals and funerals, and moments too full to be disturbed by sound, as officers in dress blues lined the aisles beneath soft golden lights, and a single podium stood center stage, flanked by the hush of reverence and the weight of memory. The speaker's voice was calm, but trembled around the edges as he read from the citation. Words like bravery, sacrifice, and instinct. Words that tried to capture something bigger than medals and protocol, something that pulsed in the heart of a dog who had stood still in the face of death and said, without language, "Not yet." Titan sat near the stage, his coat brushed to a sheen, his vest freshly fitted, but his eyes were the same, deep, alert, and old with knowing, as if time had deepened his gaze instead of dulling it. The medal was pinned gently to his vest, a medallion of honor resting over the scarred place where a bullet had grazed him during the chaos of the cartel takedown, and when applause gently filled the room. It wasn't for tradition. It was for Titan, the dog who disobeyed orders, and in doing so saved lives, who remembered what others forgot, who trusted his instincts when no one else did. In the front row, Alex rose slowly, his face older somehow, more grounded, the weight of grief transformed into something steadier, something forged. And as he stepped onto the stage, his steps slowed, not from nerves, but from recognition, and when he reached Titan, he didn't speak, didn't need to. He knelt, eyes locked with the dog's, memories flickering like old film. Stormy nights, whispered goodbyes, a folded note pressed into a vest, and a bond that outlived loss. Titan tilted his head, studied him for a breathless moment, then nudged him gently, just once, before his tail gave a single slow wag, the kind that doesn't shout but knows. And in that hush, as cameras flashed and hearts caught in throats, a voice rose, not aloud, but through voiceover, soft and rhythmic like a lullaby for heroes. "Trust your instincts," it said, like a drumbeat from the past, when fear clouds the path. Trust your instincts when the world turns away. Trust your instincts, because love remembers what logic forgets. The screen faded to a slow close-up of Titan's medal, the reflections of stage lights dancing across its surface like firelight, from destruction, warmth, and the voice returned one last time. And when you find yourself alone in the dark, trust your instincts. Then silence. No sound. Just stillness. Then, softly, the screen flickers to life once more, the void interrupted by a single line of white text that appears one word at a time, like a memory resurfacing from deep water. Titan retired 6 months later. He now lives with Alex. And with it, a warmth spreads through the silence, not the triumphant swell of drums or heroic fanfare, but something gentler, deeper. A piano note played in the dark, a heartbeat steady and sure. The final image fades in, a golden field beneath a late afternoon sky, wind stirring the tall grass in shimmering waves as the sun leans low toward the horizon, and from the left, two silhouettes emerge, one tall, one four-legged, walking side by side in slow, quiet rhythm. Alex, now taller, older, still carrying the memory of loss but no longer alone in it, steps forward with easy strides, the leash in his hand loose, unneeded, more symbol than tether. And beside him, Titan walks not as a soldier, not as a survivor, but as family, his fur catching the sunlight like a cloak, his eyes soft and calm, and for a moment the world feels whole again. They pause near the hill's crest, and Alex looks down at him, no words exchanged, because none are needed. Titan looks back with the quiet dignity of one who has seen death and still chosen life, who has given everything and asked for nothing, and then, as if on cue, they move forward again, walking into the light together. The camera lingers, pulling back slowly, the wind rising just enough to carry the final voiceover, soft and steady, wrapping around the moment like a whispered truth. Some heroes speak, others bark. A beat, then one more sentence, this time spoken directly to the heart, a call that doesn't shout but settles like a seed in the soul. If you've ever doubted the power of trust, think again. The screen fades to white, and in the silence that follows, the only sound left is the faint echo of footsteps fading into forever.